Moving on to 17, the Raiders. This is one of those teams that every year reaches up and grabs a guy who I don't think is really worthy of that selection. That doesn't mean they're not going to be good players, but I think they could just potentially trade back and get them a little later. And so to try and keep with that theme, and also just based on their needs, I think they're going to go defensive line here. And I thought about going edge rusher, like I said, a Jalen Phillips, a Jason Owe, but to me, those guys don't feel like reaches. And this may feel like I'm sort of dogging the Raiders for saying this, but I still think this guy's really solid. And I can't remember if you actually had him higher than this. But I am taking, and you're gonna have to help me with his name. It is Levi, the defensive tackle from Washington.
Onwuzurike.
Yeah, Onwuzurike. I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway,
I may not pronounce
I
that
could
correct
see
either, but it
him.
was close. I think.
Yeah, I could see him being a first round pick. But most people I've seen are saying like late first, most likely a second round guy. But once again, the Raiders they consistently reach, and so I'm looking for that guy who I think they would reach up for, and that's who I'm taking. So yeah, moving on, the Miami Dolphins. We got Jamar Chase for them early on. I think at that point, offense is sort of set. I have seen some people linking them to a running back, but my thoughts on running back. It's just not a position that I value as a first round position.
Hey, I mean, I agree. I didn't have a single running back on the first round.
Yeah. So, especially at this pick, I feel like if you wanted Najee Harris or Etienne, you could trade back. Um, I don't know how far you trade back because there are rumors that like the Steelers really want Najee, but I think you could trade back and get one of those guys. So, yeah, I'm kind of throwing that out the window. And to me, this is where you get, one of those homegrown kind of guy. Well, not homegrown, but local, recently kind of guys. He solves a big need. That is an edge rusher. That is Mr. Jalen Phillips. To me, I mean, on our pass rusher rankings, I didn't have him in my top three. If anywhere, it'd be fourth. Once again, injury concerns or something that worries me a little bit. But being your second, first round draft pick of the day, being the need that they have on that edge spot, and also the potential that he does have, the upside. If injuries don't come back at any point in his career, this guy could be the best defensive lineman out of this draft. So I think the Dolphins would be comfortable taking the risk here of getting a Jalen Phillips like prospect, especially with how solid their defensive back units are. A lot of teams like to, protect their defensive backs by getting a lot of pressure. The Dolphins are not one of those teams because of the defensive backs they have. David Howard, Byron Jones. I can't remember his name, but he's the first round pick that they took last year.
Noah, I don't know. Yeah, Noah. I know his first name's Noah.
Yeah, he's got one of those hard
He's
pronounced
out of
last
Auburn.
names.
Sorry, Noah, if
Yeah.
you're listening. Just a tough one.
Yeah. But they have a lot of, capital invested at the secondary position. And so because of that, they can just have their guys go out and just try to get sacks. They don't have to try and, rush the QBs and make, all these off, whatever throws, because the secondary is going to do their job. They're going to cover guys. They're going to lock them down. And so Jalen Phillips, I think, would just fit perfectly in that situation with the Dolphins. And so pick number 19, Washington. Once again, another team that could go quite a few different ways. But to me, the pick here is Trey Lance. I was tempted to not put him in the first round, but I think just with Washington's needs, with Chicago coming up next, with the possibility that more injuries happen, because that tends to happen in Washington, and they have to turn to the stable of QBs that they currently have. I think that they want stability. They want a guy who they can get long term. They thought Dwayne Haskins was going to be that guy. He's not. You get Fitzpatrick, a guy who can be a mentor, and you get a high upside guy like Lance. You'll let him sit on the bench. Ron Rivera, once again, we've talked about him. He's worked with Cam Newton over the years. I mean, Cam was an MVP in Carolina. And so I think Trey Lance getting a year, maybe two, sitting on the bench, working with a quarterback who can really utilize, or not a quarterback, a coach who can utilize his skill set. I think Trey Lance would just be a solid fit there. And also, Washington is positioned to realistically win the division this year, the NFC East. I mean, I think they're probably the favorites to win it. Um, I don't know the betting odds and all that kind of stuff, but they're probably considered the favorites to win the NFC East right now. And so if they want a quarterback in the future, either they're going to have to suck, or which I don't think is going to happen because of just the level of their defense is at, and also the weapons they have on offense with Antonio Gibson and Scary Terry and all them, or they have to trade a lot of draft capital to get there. So if a guy like Trey Lance falls into their lap there, although in my opinion it feels like a little bit of a reach because once again I'm not super high on Lance. I think the upside is it's there, and so you take the risk, you get a quarterback, and you hope it pays off. Because also with the way the NFL rookie contracts work, you're not investing a ton of money into that guy. So him sitting on the bench, it's not the worst thing in the world. Um, Moving on to the Chicago Bears. I think if Trey Lance goes before their pick, they're going to be gutted because I'm not sold that they believe in Andy Dalton, even though they made the QB1 tweet. And I know that Bears fans, they've suffered for a long time, and they're
They had Jay
I mean, they're
Cutler.
not one of the more. What do you say?
They had Jay Cutler. He wasn't bad.
Yeah, I mean,
He just wasn't, Aaron Rodgers. That's the only problem. He played in the division with Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford.
and listen, if you're a Bears fan and you've had to watch Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Matthew Stafford, and even some of the Vikings quarterbacks, Randall Cunningham, Dante Culpepper over the years, like Kirk Cousins, like it's gotta suck, man. Because the Bears, when your best quarterback is Jay Cutler all time, that's tough. And so I think they'd be desperate for a QB if a Trey Lance was there, but I don't think they're desperate enough to now take like a Kyle Trask or a Kellen Mond or somebody in the first round. So at this point, you go and you fix the biggest need. To me, it's offensive line. Their offensive line was pretty horrible last year. Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky. I mean, there's only so much they could realistically do with the offensive line play last year. And I mean, there's just so many plays too where the receivers were wide open, and if the quarterback had a second longer, they would have been able to make the throw. So this is where I think Devin Jenkins goes. I know a lot of Bears fans too are really high on Devin Jenkins. Excuse me. They want Devin Jenkins to be the pick. I think if he is there, just with the holes they have on the outside of their offensive line. I mean, they have Cody Whitehair, they have James Daniels, so they have some solid young interior guys, but their tackle spots are in flux. And so I think you get a Tevin Jenkins to anchor that offensive line for Andy Dalton, because we saw last year him having to run for his life quite a bit with the Cowboys, and that's not his game. So you help him out by getting him an offensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Mooney Wave when he commented on our shared mock about quote, if we take Phillips, I'll cry, because then we asked him, what do you want? He said, Tevin Jenkins. So, I forgot his name already. God darn it. For Mooney Wave, there you go, buddy. There's Tevin Jenkins for your Bears. You can sleep a little easier tonight.
Yep, you get Devin Jenkins. Now the Colts. The Colts are an interesting team because obviously they have Carson Wentz. They have Jonathan Taylor coming back in year 2. They could use an offensive lineman, but Tevin Jenkins going there, which I believe I had Tevin Jenkins there in our combined draft, but he's gone, and I'm not super high on a lot of the tackles at this spot. I think they could trade back and get one of the guys that they could potentially take, like an Alex Leatherwood or a Walker Little or whoever. But I think if they're going to stay put at this spot, Caleb Farley and the talent that he has and the need at corner, it's too tempting to pass up for a playoff team. You add him into that defense, and once again, if the injuries, if they don't come back to bite him, he could be the best defensive player out of this draft. So I think the Colts, they take the risk. Just they're more in a position where they can take that risk because of how good they are. And so I think Caleb Farley, he doesn't slide past 21 to me. I know that there has been some mocks that had your Packers taking him, but I just can't see him falling that far. So yeah, Colts get Caleb Farley, and the Titans. Once again, another team that I think could use a corner. They lost. Shoot, now I'm blanking on his name. Malcolm Butler
Adoree
and
Jackson.
Adoree Jackson. Yes, they lost 2 of their starting corners, and I I don't know who their corners are after that at this point. And I know that you and Chris Sims are not super high on JC Horn, but I think he's going to go in the first round. I think the need is there. And so I think the Titans take him. I think he could potentially go higher than this in the real draft, because his once again, his zone press strengths are amazing when he's in that sort of a scheme. And so if he can find a team that does that, that'd be great for him. I don't know if the Titans are that team, because their defense isn't all that. But I think that, yeah, the Titans, with the need that they have at corner, I think that that's who they're going to take because of the upside he does have if he works out, and also he has that corner swagger that you want, that confidence in himself, to go out there and just dominate people. The New York Jets, in our combined one, I had them taking a running back, but as we all know, like I said, that was more of a realistic pick of what I think they might do. But I'm not super high on corners, sorry, I'm not super high on running backs, and so I don't think that that's what I would do if I was the Jets. If I am the Jets, I'm thinking about that thing that you brought up, which is, when was the last time the New York Jets had a premier pass rushing talent? I can't
Not in
remember.
our lifetime.
Yeah. So to me, this is where I'm thinking, either Ojulari or Jason Owe. Uh, and I'm going Ojulari. I mean, that's who I think is the better of the two. His technique, his ability, to rush the passer. I think that he's got the best out of the whole draft class at those two things specifically. And also, he, in a Robert Saleh defense where we've seen guys like a Nick Bosa have success, I think Saleh would be salivating over, the pass rushing talent that an Ojulari could have, and then also trying to coach him up and mold him into, a better run stuffer, and be more active in the run game. But in the pass rush, at least, I think Ojulari would just be such a weapon for the Jets there. Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. I know a lot of people want Najee Harris here, not high on running backs. I like the pick that you made, which is Landon Dickerson, offensive lineman out of Alabama. I think Landon Dickerson's a stud. I mean, it's Alabama. We've seen what he was able to do. In college, he was a monster. And the Steelers' offensive line, uh, they've
Starting to
taken
fall
some
apart.
hits. Yeah, they've taken
all,
some hits.
all I have is the
Um,
Castro left, really.
yeah, and DeCastro, guy's a beast. But you need more offensive line here. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they took a tackle. But I think Landon Dickerson, to me, he's the best available lineman at that spot. And so I think, just with how much they need help on that line, and also with Pouncey retiring, you go get a guy like Landon Dickerson to help anchor the interior of our offensive line. And then he can help a Benny Snell, or if they do get a running back later in the draft, then he can help that guy, run. Because I saw a funny comment on Instagram, which was, all these Steelers fans want Najee Harris, but where's he going to run with all these offensive linemen stinking? And it's a
That's a good
fact.
point.
Like, if your offensive
I like it.
line's not very good, there's only so much your running back can do. I mean, we've seen games where Saquon Barkley has had like 20 yards on 15 carries, and that was just because their offensive line sucks. So
I mean,
yeah, I
even
think
Joe
Landon
Mixon,
Dickerson.
as someone who had him 2 years ago in fantasy, he's a talented back. Granted off field stuff, but he hasn't done anything in the past 2 years statistically, just because no offensive line. They can't open any
Yeah,
holes for him.
and I mean, look at Zeke this year. Offensive line was deteriorated, tons of injuries. Zeke has the worst year of his career. So, with the way the running back works in the NFL these days, if you don't have a good offensive line, there's only so much your running back can do. You have to have at least a serviceable line, and I think Landon Dickerson gets them closer to that point, because they have him, they have DeCastro, they can piece together the other spots, maybe even draft another guy in the second or third, to help anchor that line even more. The Jaguars, sort of like the Jets, and the Dolphins, have another first round pick. They got their guy earlier, Trevor Lawrence. And as I said in our combined one, I'm not sure if I had him going here or not. But you got to protect your investment or get him a weapon. And I'm not sold on them taking a receiver here. I think they have some decent young talent, and also they might be willing to take a receiver later in the draft. But because of the fact that they had to, I believe, just franchise tag Cam Robinson, right? Um,
Correct. Yep. Cam Robinson's
yeah, so
franchise tagged, not extended. I don't
having to
think.
do that, maybe leaves next year. I think you get a tackle. This is where I think Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama goes. Once again, another Alabama offensive lineman. And I mean, they ran the ball a ton in college, and we know that Urban Meyer, he likes to run the ball, and that's probably what they're going to, rely on. Carlos Hyde, they signed him. They have James Robinson. So I think Alex Leatherwood, he's a good fit here. And if Cam Robinson does stay with the team, boom, you have Alex Leatherwood playing right tackle. So there you go. The Cleveland Browns.
Oh boy.
What'd you say?
I said, oh boy.
Yeah. Cleveland, if this guy's here, I think Cleveland is jumping for joy because we've talked about their need for somebody in the middle of that defense, whether it's defensive tackle or a linebacker, and you've already highlighted them. Jeremiah Owosu, I can't remember how to say it.
Koromoa, I think.
Koromoa, yeah. Realistically, I think he goes higher than this. I think he's just such a talented linebacker. And at this point, I think I've only had Zaven Collins and Micah Parsons going. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes higher than Zaven Collins. He's just one of those athletic freak linebackers. And Notre Dame, I mean, they always produce solid linebacking talent. So, yeah, I think if Cleveland can get him, they would just be so happy because we know how important that linebacker position is. And we know that with the defense they have constructed, they have a solid young secondary. They have two premier, pass rushers in Clowney and Myles Garrett. But they need defensive tackle or they need a linebacker. And I think with the defensive tackle talent in this draft, they'd be comfortable waiting until the second or third. And you get a guy like Jeremiah Owosu Koromoa to anchor that linebacker spot at 26. Now the Ravens, I know I've been saying a lot of teams are interesting, and I apologize, but the Ravens to me are the most interesting team now because they have 2 first-round picks very close to each other, and it's a tough spot here because I know that at least in your draft and our combined one so far, I'm pretty sure we've had wide receivers going right after them at both the Saints and the Packers, right?
Yeah, but I think we gave him wide receivers too. I think it's when it was like a run on wide receivers when it really
Yeah, we
started.
gave the Ravens one too, but then the Saints and Packers also took one right after them, which is why I'm interested here because I'm just trying to think.
Tony.
I mean, they lost a lot of their defensive linemen. They lost Judon. They lost Yannick Ngakoue, like you said. I mean, they've lost some of their talent up there, and we know that they are very blitz heavy. They like to have a lot of athletes up front, and I think they'd honestly be comfortable with a few of the receivers available at this point. But I'm not sure if they're sold on as many of the defensive line talent at this point. And so I'm throwing a curveball here, and this is purely because they have that other first-round pick. If they didn't, I don't think they do this. But I think this is where Jason Owe falls. I mean, imagine that athletic freak on a Ravens defense. Man, that would be scary. Because we know how much they covet speed, the blitzing, just all that kind of stuff. Pairing him with Calais Campbell, Patrick Queen, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, man, that would just be terrifying to have that monster of a man in Jason Owe rushing the passer for the Ravens. But like I said, I think they're comfortable with a few of the receivers here, and so I think that Jason Owe, he goes before he'd be the first of their 2 picks because if I'm them, I might be worried that potentially any of these 3 teams, because I mean the Saints, the Packers, and the Bills could all use edge rushing talent. I'd be more worried of them taking it away.
Not the Packers.
Sorry, not the Packers. You're right.
But I hear you. Saints, Bills. Yeah, those next 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean they could take an edge rusher, and so I think with the receivers that are still here, like I said, comfortable of waiting to see who falls to them at 31. All right, the Saints. Quite a few needs. They're not in flux, but they're in the post Drew Brees era. So no one really knows what we're going to get out of the Saints this year. And obviously we've talked about wide receiver as a spot here, and I'm going to keep consistent with that. And it's large in part because, I mean, with Drew Brees, I think you could have less talent around him and still make things happen. With Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill, I think that you're going to want to help your quarterback out even more. You have Kamara, you have Michael Thomas, but we've seen even with Breeze that sometimes that can become sort of a hindrance for that team, is not having another option that's super reliable. And the Saints, when they're at their best, always have quite a few, options, just for their passing game. Emmanuel Sanders was solid; he was serviceable, but I think the Saints are just going to want more in the post Drew Brees era, and so this is where I think your boy Kadarius Toney goes.
Okay.
The versatility that he provides for both the slot, but also can play the outside. Obviously, we know Michael Thomas is going to be the number one, but I think Toney, you can just move him around to a lot of different spots. And so, yeah, the tough part for the receivers at this point for me are a lot of them are smaller, sort of slot guys. Toney, I mean, maybe outside of Bateman, because Bateman's he's a bit bigger than most of these guys, like 6'1", but I'm not super high on Bateman. I know that you aren't either. But Toney, I mean, he's just sort of one of those versatile Swiss Army knife type of players, and we saw what he was able to do with Florida. With Kyle Pitts being the number one option, Toney still had a fantastic season with Kyle Trask and the gang. So I wouldn't be surprised if a coach like Sean Payton would, take such a versatile player, because we've seen what they do with Taysom Hill and all the creative stuff they could do there. So I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if they took a sort of Swiss Army knife like a Kadarius Toney that you can use in the backfield. You can use him, for all these, sweeps and all this kind of crazy stuff, but you can also use him out of the slot and the outside. So I think Kadarius Toney goes there. For the Green Bay Packers, once again, I'm sticking with wide receiver. I've seen some drafts where they take a tackle here, but I'm not super high on all the tackle prospects that are available at this point. So I think they take wide receiver. I know we had someone comment on, I think it was our combined mock draft, that there was another wide receiver going to Green Bay, and they were complaining that the wide receiver wasn't the issue. But he was
Oh
a
yeah.
Packers fan, could probably attest that Devontae Adams, he's the only consistent one, and after that, it's you never know fully what you're going to get, whether it's health concerns with Lazard, whether it's the dropped passes from Valdez Scantling, just all the different stuff. But at the apex of this problem, I think it is Devontae Adams is the one guy that can truly get himself open, and the other two guys, they're not reliably getting themselves into space. And so this is where I took this kind of combined one, but this is where my guy Elijah Moore goes. I think that he is just so good at getting separation with his route running ability, that I think the Packers would absolutely love him. The ability to throw him in the slot, and then you keep Allen Lazard and Scantling, on the outside with Devontae Adams. I mean, Elijah Moore, he would just be a mismatch problem. I mean, he would be. I don't want to say he's like an Edelman, Wes Welker, one of like Cole Beasley kind of guys, but like he has that sort of route running ability in him. Just I think with more speed and more athleticism than those guys. So I think that he would be an absolute stud in Green Bay. The Buffalo Bills at this spot.
It's tough here.
This is where I originally had Jason Owe falling, because initially the Ravens only had one first round pick, and so they were going to take a wide receiver with that spot. But once they acquired a second and they took Owe at 27, it made it a little tough for me when it came to Buffalo, especially just with the talent that's available here. But where I ended up landing, and I'm not super high on this pick, because this might be the toughest pick out of the entire draft for me, just because of who's available and the needs that they have. But I think this is where I can't remember his name, but it's that corner that you like out of Georgia, Eric Stokes. He's right there.
That's not Eric Stokes. That one, not the one I
Not
like.
Stokes. I don't know, which one do you like?
Tyson Campbell.
Tyson Campbell. Yeah, this is where I think Tyson Campbell goes. I mean, it might be a little bit of a reach, but Buffalo, with the secondary they do have, you add a cornerback. I know that Greg Newsome is a guy that people are super high on, but I'm not as high on him as some other people. I also thought about maybe an Asante Samuel Jr., but I think he's more of a second-round pick. I think that Tyson Campbell, yeah, he just has that sort of potential where he could really fill in nicely opposite of a Tre'Davious White, but he also has the versatility to play as that nickel corner. So I think he could be an instant impact player for a Buffalo Bills defense. So I had him going at number 30. As I alluded to with the Baltimore Ravens, I think they take receiver.
Okay.
And initially, I think I had them taking Kadarius Toney in our combined one.
Yes,
But
we both
I
did.
think,
Or and mine
yeah,
and the combined. Sorry.
yeah, I think the one thing that I think they really want is size. And so this is where I think a Terrence Marshall Jr. goes. He's 6'3". He
I like
has
it.
the best size out of pretty much any of the receivers that could go in the first round. And I mean, they have Sammy Watkins, who's like 6'6". They have Hollywood Brown, who's like 5'11". So they just don't really have any sort of big body receiver. I mean, Mark Andrews is great. He's tall, but he's a tight end. So I think they want someone that can throw on the outside so they can use Hollywood Brown more so as maybe a slot guy. They can use Sammy Watkins, be versatile with him. But you have that consistent Terrence Marshall Jr. You throw him on the outside. And also I think he's one of the more underrated receivers in the first round just because of the talent that comes out of LSU, like Justin Jefferson, like Jamar Chase. But I think that he could be an absolute stud in the NFL level. And, you put him on offense with the Ravens and hopefully, Lamar Jackson, now that he has a big body target on the outside, will be able to make those throws because realistically, he just hasn't had anyone that can make those plays on the hashes outside. But now you get him a guy who can.
Last
And
pick.
now the faded Buccaneers pick, the one that I'm not excited about making at all. There's nobody that I want them to take because I don't want them to get better. I don't want them to win another Super Bowl and Tom Brady gets 8. That would just be the worst. But ultimately, I think, which I've been saying ultimately a lot tonight, but I think that this is where they look towards the future of the guys that they do have on the current team who might be retiring or leaving in the near future. And my mind instantly goes to Jason Pierre-Paul and Ndamukong Suh. I'm not sold on the edge rushers that are still available here. I think they can get one of these guys at some point during the second round. But I think Christian Barrymore out of Alabama, this is where he goes. I know he's sort of climbed up draft boards, over the last month or so, because a lot of people, were considering him a second round pick. I even was hoping that Dallas could get him in the second round. But I think that he's going to be one of those guys because there's always some sort of defensive tackle that like falls to the end of the first round. I think of like Malcolm Brown out of Texas. The Patriots got him with the last pick of the first round. And I think this is a similar situation. Really great college career out of Christian Barrymore. I think the Buccaneers, the rich get richer. They add more defensive line talent to prepare them for the future, where Ndamukong Suh might leave, and also to make sure that if another Vita Vea injury pops up, they are prepared for it.
All right, and yeah, I do hear that. I think the defensive tackle is one I thought about when I did 32. But looking at yours, I mean, I don't have many complaints. I mean, my only one is personally J.C. Horn. But hey, I mean, it sounds like teams are high on him. Just because I'm not high on him doesn't mean he shouldn't go in the first. I love the Trey Lance to Washington at 19. Although I do agree with you, I would imagine he's not going to fall that far. Like I mentioned with Justin Fields, the team's going to trade up if one of those guys falls
Right.
out of the top 10 probably. I mean, I'm not in love with him.
Realistically,
Good.
could you see all of the 5 quarterbacks going top 10? Because
No.
I don't think so either. But I was listening and I think this is the third time in history that 3 quarterbacks are going to go top 3, unless one of these 3 teams just pulls a shocker and doesn't take one. But like it happened in the McNabb draft class, and then it happened like once in the 70s. But I don't think in history ever 4 quarterbacks have gone in a row to start the draft. So if Atlanta or somebody trades up to that spot, does it, that would be history in the making. And then at that point, if 4 go in those first 4 picks, I don't know, it could very well happen where somebody trades up to take like a Trey Lance or a Fields, whoever's not in that top 4 to get that guy at like a 7 or 8.
I mean, it could happen. It's the draft.
Realistically, I don't think it
but
happens
It could, and if it
because
does,
teams
I
always
would.
be patient, but that'd be crazy.
If it does, I would expect to see a lot more trade ups because then you're going to see
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot more of these premier guys, like we talk about Sewell. All these premier, all these guys are going to start. That means by default, these guys are going to start falling. So yeah, I think it'll be a lot more positioning if that occurs. But honestly, I
I mean, where does Kyle Pitts go at that point? Like somebody's going to trade up for him if he doesn't get taken up for.
Yeah, I mean Miami still could. Trying to think, starting to go up. I'm sitting here thinking. I mean, I don't know about the Lions, but maybe the Panthers would be a great spot for him to add with
Oh
Sam
yeah,
Darnold,
Panthers would love it.
another versatile weapon. So, um, yeah, I mean, at this point, like I said, I got no issues with anything you really did. Nothing outlandish, nothing I'm gonna tell you crazy about because it is a draft. So, I mean, if anything, I don't know. We're both probably gonna be really off on as compared to the actual game day. But yeah, so no real shockers there. Unlike me, you had all five of those guys go in the first round. I left out Trey Lance out of the first round. So, but otherwise, good mock, good mock. I like it. Anything else you wanted to comment on or mention?